She insisted it be just the two of us. A quiet dinner, no distractions. I put on my best shirt, hoping we could reconnect. We used to go to this place for anniversaries. Small, candlelit, tucked behind a bookstore on 9th. The kind of place where the waiter knows your name and the wine glasses feel too thin to hold. I remember her laughing here once, just loud enough to make me blush. That version of her feels like a ghost now, more scent than substance. She told me she wanted to talk. Just us. A night away from the noise, she said. I thought maybe she meant it. Maybe after all the distance and the cold silences, she wanted to try. So I ironed my shirt. The blue one she used to say brought out my eyes. Sprayed the cologne she'd bought me for our second anniversary. I even made a dinner reservation under her name. I wanted it to feel like a date. Like we were choosing each other again. But when I walked in, I saw a table for 3. And someone else had already taken my seat. He was younger than me. Looser. Like someone who thinks he owns every room he walks into. And somehow he was already mid-laugh, his hand on my wife's wrist in a way that made my stomach lurch. She didn't even look surprised to see me. Just gave me this tight smile like we were about to sit through a very awkward business meeting. Then he leaned forward, his voice oiled with condescension. We thought you deserved to hear it from us directly. That's when the floor dropped. The waiter was still standing there, asking if I wanted water, and I was trying to remember how to speak. How to breathe. I sat down because standing felt like too much effort. The candle on the table flickered between us, casting shadows on their smirks. She looked away, pretending to adjust her napkin. And that was when I realized this wasn't spontaneous. This was staged. They'd planned this. The audacity wasn't just in the betrayal. It was in the choreography. In the smug glint in his eyes and the way she didn't even try to explain. I think that's what hurt the most. Not the affair. Not even the smug coworker. But the fact that she thought I deserved to be humiliated like this, in public, in person, as if my devastation was some kind of performance art. My hands were in my lap, clenched so tight the knuckles had gone white. I tried to ask a question. Any question. But none came. What was I supposed to say? Why? How long? Do you love him? All of it felt too small. Too late. Like shouting at an avalanche after it's already buried you. There was a moment, just a breath, where she looked at me like she might crack. Like some flicker of guilt might break the veneer. But then she blinked it away and turned back toward him. As if the decision had already been made. As if I was just the last person to get the memo. And that's when I realized this wasn't a dinner. It was an execution. She hadn't invited me to talk. She'd invited me to end. He offered me money. Like I was a problem he could pay to disappear. He didn't even fold it. Just slid it across the table, face up, the amount printed in blue ink, daring me to react. I didn't. Not at first. I stared at it, this piece of paper that was supposed to summarize the worth of a marriage. Of a decade. Of me. A check. It wasn't even for a round number. As if he'd run some kind of calculation, tax estimates, lawyer fees, maybe the emotional cost of guilt, and landed on a figure that felt both insulting and precise. He could have at least made it clean. But no. Even his bribe came with condescension. You leave her clean, he said with that Wall Street confidence. No drama. No court. No dignity, he forgot to add. No voice. No closure. Just vanish. I think I laughed because it felt safer than screaming. It slipped out before I could stop it. A raw, broken sound that startled the waiter clearing plates behind us. I wanted to stand up and flip the table. I wanted to ask her what this was, a negotiation? An auction? But she didn't even look up. Just sipped her wine, calm as still water. Like she'd already detached. Already decided that I was a chapter to be quietly edited out. Maybe she hadn't even written this part, maybe he had. Maybe this was all his idea. But then I remembered the way she hadn't blinked when he called our life drama. She didn't argue. She didn't object. She didn't stop him. And that was louder than anything he said. My chair scraped too hard against the tile as I stood. The sound was shrill, jarring, a small, clumsy rebellion in a room designed for polite endings. My voice shook when I spoke. Not because I was afraid, but because some part of me still couldn't believe it had come to this. You think you can pay me to disappear? I asked him. You think she's a house or a car? Something you just buy out? He shrugged like it didn't matter. Because to him, it didn't. To her, I realized it might not either. I turned to her then, needing something. A flinch, a wince, some flash of the woman I married. But all I saw was distance. A stranger in my wife's skin. I told him what he could do with his offer. I won't write the words here. Not because they were cruel, but because they were hollow. Truthfully, I think I was talking to the ghost of myself more than to him. The man who still believed this was salvageable. That if I just said the right thing, she'd remember who we were. But she didn't. She just watched me like I was part of the mess she needed to clean up. And that's when I knew. She was already gone. Not planning to go. Not on the edge. Gone. You don't measure the worth of a marriage in zeros. But he tried. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her silence signed the check. I thought I was losing my mind, until I saw the truth with my own eyes. It slipped from his jacket pocket as we stood outside. 1 second we were chest to chest, his voice low and smug, mine trembling with restraint. And the next, a small black flash drive clinked onto the pavement between us. Neither of us noticed it at first. Not until I bent to pick up my keys and felt the cold plastic against my fingers. I almost gave it back. Almost. But something in his expression changed the moment he realized I had it. Not fear, calculation. Like he'd already weighed the consequences and didn't find them threatening. Like I couldn't handle the truth it held. Or worse, like he wanted me to see it. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a warning. Either way, it was mine now. At home, I stared at the drive for hours before opening it. My laptop felt heavier than usual. The room too quiet, like it knew what was coming. I half expected it to be empty, a bluff, a trap, a digital shrug. It wasn't. The folders were organized. Names, dates, screenshots, receipts, like a gallery exhibit titled, "Your life was a lie." There was a picture from February. She told me she was at a work retreat. She texted me goodnight with a hotel hallway behind her. Said she missed me, but in this photo she wasn't alone. Same hotel, different room, different bed. Him. I kept scrolling. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to feel something. Maybe I wanted to find something redeemable. A line she hadn't crossed. But it was all there. The passwords she used to book rooms. The messages where she called him the name she once reserved for me. The way she'd joke about our dinners, how predictable I'd become. Every click hurt less because it hurt so much. Like nerves burning out. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared. As if looking long enough would somehow change it. As if reality would bend under the weight of my disbelief. But it didn't. It just sat there, silent and cold, waiting to be accepted. And that's the thing about proof. It doesn't argue. It doesn't need to. It just is. I'd known somewhere beneath the denial. In the way she turned away when I reached for her. In how she laughed at her phone but not my jokes. In the dreams where she disappeared and didn't bother to say goodbye. I wasn't blindsided. I was confirmed. She hadn't just drifted. She hadn't just slipped. She'd chosen this. Repeatedly. Without remorse. Without pause. And the hardest part? The worst part? It wasn't surprising. It was inevitable. I didn't find the truth. It found me. And asked why I took so long. Denial isn't disbelief. It's hope wearing a blindfold. I expected guilt. Maybe even regret. What I got was contempt. I rehearsed the conversation a dozen times on the drive over. The quiet kind, not dramatic. Just questions, measured and fair. Something salvageable in the tone. Like maybe she'd reach for honesty if I didn't reach for blame. I told myself I wanted answers. Closure. But deep down, I wanted a crack. A tear. Something human. Instead, I got a shrug. "You stopped being interesting," she said. Standing in the doorway like I was late for an appointment she didn't care about. I checked out years ago. I blinked, waiting for the punchline. Waiting for her face to soften. For her to say it was the grief talking. The stress. That she didn't mean it. But she meant it. Her tone didn't waver. Her expression didn't shift. She'd practiced too. There were no tears. No apology. No scrambling to make me understand. Only detachment, pure and surgical. As if I were the one who'd forgotten something vital, and she was just confirming what she assumed I already knew. I tried to speak. I think I did. But the words tangled in my throat like string soaked in ice water. My hands felt heavy, useless at my sides. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, phone in one hand. The same hand that used to hold mine when she was nervous. Now it was a shield. I remember staring at the hardwood floor just behind her. The same place we'd once sat cross-legged eating takeout after assembling furniture. That memory felt foreign now, like someone else's life. And that was the worst part. She'd already rewritten the story. She wasn't erasing it. She had erased it. I was a chapter she'd skimmed, maybe bookmarked once, then skipped entirely. In her version, I wasn't the man she built a life with. I was the background noise she learned to ignore. "I don't know what you want from me," she added. Not angry, not sad, just bored. That's when I knew there was nothing left to say. I didn't slam the door. I didn't beg. I didn't yell. I just walked out, not because I was weak, but because I needed to feel something other than rage. Her words weren't fire. They were ice. And I was tired of standing in the cold, hoping for warmth that wasn't coming. Sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's survival. When your world burns, you either stand in the ashes or start building again. The house was too quiet that night. It echoed in ways I hadn't noticed before. I walked past the mirror in the hallway and didn't recognize the man staring back. Not because I looked different, but because I finally saw the weight I'd been carrying. The disappointment, the humiliation, the truth that I'd been pretending not to know. I sat on the edge of the bed, our bed, though it already felt like a stranger's, and called my brother. We hadn't spoken much lately. I wasn't even sure what I was hoping to hear, but I told him everything. All of it. The dinner, the check, the drive, her contempt. There was a long pause on the other end. Then just 6 words. Don't let them own your pain. It hit harder than anything she'd said, because that's what it felt like they had taken not just our marriage, but my reaction to it. They were writing the story, framing the scene, deciding who I was supposed to be next. I couldn't change what happened, but I could change who got to define it. The next morning, I hired someone, a private investigator, not for revenge, not to expose them to friends or family. I didn't want the gossip, the spectacle. I wanted something else. Clarity. I wanted every lie traced, every shadow illuminated, every whispered moment brought into the light where I could finally own it. Not to weaponize, but to witness. Because when people lie to you long enough, you start to doubt your own memory. You start to question the shape of your own life. I needed the proof, not to punish them, but to validate myself. He worked fast. Bank transfers, deleted texts, surveillance logs, hotel timestamps, office security footage. It was all there, layered and damning. Like watching a slow-motion betrayal from a distance, one I had front-row seats to, but somehow never really saw. I read every report like scripture. Not because I needed to be convinced, but because I needed to reclaim the timeline. My version. My truth. This wasn't about the divorce anymore. It wasn't even about them. It was about dignity. About taking back the pieces of myself they tried to scatter through indifference, through manipulation, through their cowardice. They thought they'd broken me, but they only cleared the ground. And now I was building. Pain doesn't define you. What you do with it does. They rewrote our story with a lie. I responded with the truth. Even liars turn on each other when the spotlight gets hot enough. Truth has a way of warping things when it finally surfaces. Not cleanly, not gracefully. It cracks and peels and infects. My investigator called it secondary combustion, the aftermath when the fallout starts spreading to the people who thought they were untouchable. The first report came like an afterthought. A footnote in an email full of timestamps and license plates. Coworker, her current partner, seems agitated. Notice tension between them. He's been asking questions. At first, I thought it was nothing. Maybe he was just paranoid. Maybe he finally realized what it felt like to be the one outside the loop. But the updates kept coming. She was still lying. Still playing the same cold, calculated game, just with different names. There were messages, late-night ones, sent to someone neither of us recognized. Different tone. Different intimacy. The same pattern. The same poison. And this time, he was the one squinting at a phone screen at 2 a.m., pretending not to know what he already knew. My investigator followed it like clockwork. Confrontation. Deflection. Denial. Then silence. He tried calling her bluff. Tried showing her the proof. And she did what she always did, rewrote the script mid-scene, flipped the spotlight, made him the villain in a story he never saw coming. I almost pitied him. Almost. Because now he knew what it felt like to walk into a life you thought was yours and realize it had already been repurposed. That you weren't the destination. Just the detour. Then he did something unexpected. He called me. 3 missed calls. 1 voicemail I never listened to. Maybe he wanted to commiserate. Maybe he thought we were the same 2 men caught in her web, tangled in the same betrayal. But he forgot something important. He helped build the web. He was the match. She was the gasoline, and I was the house they burned down. So I gave him exactly what he gave me. Silence. Not out of cruelty. Not even out of spite. But because some people don't deserve answers. They deserve echo. And now he was standing where I had been, at the edge of something he thought was love, staring into the hollow space where it used to live. He wanted sympathy. I gave him a mirror. When you lie together, don't be surprised when the truth pulls you apart. I didn't scream. I didn't hit. I didn't beg. I showed the truth and walked away. Some people imagine justice as loud, as cathartic, as fists slamming tables and voices cracking with fury. But justice doesn't have to shout. Sometimes it's as quiet as an envelope sliding across a desk. I filed the papers. No warning. No preamble. Just facts, sealed and notarized. Then I sent the evidence not to her, not to him, but to the people who mattered. The ones whose opinions could not be charmed or rewritten. Her boss received the full report, the dates she called in sick, the photos that showed where she really was, the company card receipts tagged to hotel minibars and dinners with someone who wasn't me. It didn't take much. Just enough to show a pattern. A breach. An erosion of trust that mirrored the one she'd inflicted on me. His supervisor got the same packet. Not vindictive. Just thorough. And suddenly the smiles they wore around the office didn't seem so polished. Suddenly the rumors had receipts. And their reputations, so carefully curated, began to fracture, slow and visible like cracks in glass. No public scene. No confrontation. Just the truth, mailed and delivered with tracking numbers and timestamps. I didn't gloat. I didn't watch the fallout unfold. I didn't need to. My investigator offered updates, but I declined. I'd gotten what I came for. It wasn't revenge I was after. It was acknowledgement. I needed someone other than me to look at the wreckage and say, yes, this happened. Yes, they did this. No, you're not crazy. When someone lies to you long enough, you start to crave that validation more than any apology. That morning, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, alone, finally, and not lonely. The wind felt colder than usual. Sharper. Honest. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to explain anything to anyone. The truth was out there now. And it spoke louder than I ever could. They weren't ruined by lies. They were undone by the truth they thought they could outrun. Peace doesn't always follow justice. But it begins where denial ends. Rock bottom has one gift, it shows you who you really are underneath. The worst had already happened. The lies. The unraveling. The humiliation. But beneath all of that, something unexpected waited, not relief, not clarity, but stillness. It started small. Not with grand declarations or life-changing epiphanies. Just motion. One morning, I tied my old sneakers and ran 2 blocks before I had to stop gasping. The cold air hit my lungs like a warning. But it didn't feel punishing. It felt real. I kept running. I dusted off my old guitar, the one from college, warped from years in the attic. The strings were rusted, the tuning pegs stiff. But I liked the sound it made when I strummed it anyway. Imperfect. Hollow. Honest. Dinner with my brother became a habit. No speeches. No pity. Just quiet jokes, shared meals, and the kind of companionship that doesn't need to be explained. The silence changed too. It didn't feel like an accusation anymore or a void waiting to be filled. It felt like space. A space where I could sit without explaining myself. Without being evaluated. Without walking on eggshells. That's the thing no one tells you about losing everything. It strips you down. But sometimes what's left is true. I wasn't trying to heal for her. Or for them. Or for anyone who might be watching. I was healing for me. Then one evening in a bookstore cafe of all places, I met Claire. Not with sparks or instant butterflies. Just a conversation about a worn paperback we both reached for at the same time. No masks. No pretense. No storylines waiting to be manipulated. She asked what I liked about the book. I told her I liked the parts that hurt. She nodded. And we just talked. About stories and cities and why some people lose themselves and never realize it until they look in the mirror and see someone else's reflection. Talking to her felt like breathing after drowning. Not dramatic. Just necessary. We didn't make plans. No numbers exchanged. But when I left, I realized I wasn't checking my phone. I wasn't replaying old conversations in my head. I was present. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel haunted. I felt calm. Not healed. Not fixed. But facing the right direction. Some silences don't echo. They make room. I didn't rebuild what I lost. I built something new from what I'd forgotten I had. She reached out again. Not to apologize. But to see if she still had a hold on me. The message came late. A single line. No punctuation. No context. Just enough to stir the dust if I let it. Just wondering how you're doing. I stared at the screen for a few seconds longer than I should have, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what she wanted to hear. She didn't miss me. She missed the version of me who dropped everything when her mood shifted, who waited up for texts that never came, who studied her silences like scripture, trying to decode what he did wrong. She missed the power, the mirror I used to hold up that made her feel loved even when she didn't return it. This wasn't about guilt, or healing, or closure. It was a pulse check, a test. Would I flinch? Would I reply? Was there still a crack she could slip through? But I didn't need to ask why she reached out. I needed to ask why I didn't care. Because I didn't. Claire was beside me, legs tucked under a throw blanket, reading quietly. The afternoon sun lit her face like something from a memory I hadn't lived yet. There was no performance between us. No sharpness under the surface. Just presence. I watched her flip a page, tuck her hair behind her ear, glance up at me with a small smile, the kind that doesn't ask for anything in return. And I thought, this is what safety feels like. So I turned the phone over. Let the message fade into the background like static in a room full of music. I didn't need a final word. Or a grand declaration. The silence was enough. Because she never wanted me. She wanted her reflection in my eyes. And now she couldn't find it. She wasn't checking in. She was checking if the leash still fit. Sometimes healing sounds like a message you don't answer. You don't always get closure from others. Sometimes you give it to yourself. The apartment was smaller. 1 bedroom. Sloped ceilings. A living room that got the best light around 4 p.m. But it felt like mine the second I set the last box down. There was no echo here, no phantom laughter, no conversations I kept replaying. Just quiet. The kind that didn't ask for anything. The kind that let you breathe. I bought plants, watered them, watched them lean toward the light. I taught myself to cook one great meal. Not for guests. Not to impress. Just because it felt good to create something worth savoring. I started smiling again, not because life had returned to normal, but because it had found a new rhythm. One that didn't revolve around someone else's moods. One that wasn't a reaction to love withheld or attention dangled like bait. Claire never asked for more than I could give. She never needed grand gestures. Never needed me to explain the ruins behind my ribs. She just showed up, steadily, quietly, and left the door open. And somehow that made me want to give her everything. Not out of debt. Not out of fear she might leave. But because peace doesn't demand, it invites. We painted one of the walls dark blue. She said it made the space feel grounded. I agreed. My ex? She became a shadow. Faint. Thin. Drifting behind me, not in front of me. I didn't chase it. I didn't flinch when it appeared. It didn't define me anymore, just reminded me of the distance I'd traveled. The pain didn't vanish, but it softened. Like a scar you can trace but no longer feel. I wasn't looking back. I wasn't waiting for closure from someone who never offered it. I'd already written it myself. Because some places are just houses. And some feel like a return to something you forgot you deserved. This one, with its wide windows, steady light, and quiet mornings, felt like that. It felt like home. Peace didn't arrive like a sunrise. It crept in like forgiveness, slow, unannounced, and mine. She left a hole. I built a window.